All right, what is up? Welcome in another episode of GC Live. I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. Brought to you, as always, by our guy, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Like we always tell you, if you are in the market to buy a home, if you're thinking about buying a home in the future, or you're just curious what that might look like for you in terms of a down payment, a monthly payment, all the different options you may have, Clint is your guy to help you just sort through all that stuff. Again, phone number 803-422-6797. You can call him, you can text him, or you can go to ClintHammond.com, again, for more information. All we ask is you just give, if you're in that market, give our guy Clint an opportunity to potentially earn your business. Clint, I'm sure, was very excited today, Chris, as South Carolina got what some would say was much needed good news on the recruiting trail. I know a tough start to the week for Gamecock fans, tracking some different recruitments. Some of them, I would maybe say a little bit more hurtful than others. Obviously, I'm speaking to Carter Meadows early on this week, where that was a guy I think fans let themselves dream a little bit about the idea of possibly adding this kid. It was always going to be tough to pull a Carter Meadows from that trio of Big Ten schools that were involved there. But I get it. And then, PJ Dean, back and forth battle. You want to get a win over Georgia. He ultimately goes with Georgia. And then, of course, the one yesterday, Julian Walker committing to Michigan. But the Gamecocks get good news today. Noah Clark, 4-star defensive tackle, the second 4-star interior defensive lineman in this class, and a guy that committed at about noon, so about 2 hours ago, as we're here live, as we're recording this episode. And just clearly, man, a really big commit for South Carolina, even without the context of the start to this week.
Yeah, the start to the week definitely had folks in some various types of moods, Wes, which I get. But this is nonetheless, man, we knew was going to be a very important month, July. And there are some guys now off the board that were in varying camps, right? Carter Meadows, if you were counting on Carter Meadows, maybe you had a bad day. You shouldn't have been counting on him. That would have been an incredible get. South Carolina was in the game. You weren't tracking South Carolina as the team to beat, though, I don't think. Certainly that was never how we portrayed it. PJ Dean, South Carolina was at various points, including, I would argue, the morning of the announcement, the team to beat. Came down to the wire. Ultimately, you don't win out. Julian Walker, kind of a blindside situation, right? You laid out all those items. But there's still a lot ahead. There's a lot on the table for South Carolina this summer, not just in July, but Wes, you've got the rest of the season. You've got the transfer portal. There's a lot left to play out here. So Noah Clark was a big piece of that. This is a guy that you and I talked about this morning on the radio. I think you're going to write about it a little bit. Like when he got his South Carolina offer in, I think, late 2023, it was clear it made a big impression on him. He's got a good relationship with Travian Robertson, has seemed very comfortable with Columbia, with South Carolina. He's been on campus probably approaching double-digit times. We've got 8 visits logged in the On3 database. We probably missed a couple in there. Took his OV last month, came back several days later for an unofficial visit just to hang out, watch some teammates go through camp. So clearly a really high comfort level here, and that ultimately wins out for South Carolina, who now adds their second 4-star defensive tackle.
Yeah, and in the stream with On3, when he talked about his decision, one of the things he even mentioned was, Travian Robertson taking a chance on a guy. What did he say? A 16-year-old, 15-year-old at the time. At the time of the offer. So, that tweet where he announced the offer has been pinned to his profile on Twitter X for almost 2 years now. So certainly that was one that meant something to him. And that doesn't always mean you're going to get the guy, but it carried through in this instance. And, anytime you're getting 4-star sort of, blue chip defensive lineman out of high school, that's a big deal. That's a big thing. And South Carolina happy to win this battle today. And, I did think it was interesting. Steve Wiltfong, who was on the stream as well after, just talking a bit about the importance of, looking at his offer list too, like NC State, Virginia Tech, Virginia were the finalists, but this is a kid that had a number of true blue chip offers along the way as well. Obviously, whenever I see something like that, you're going, all right, so he's more focused, I would imagine, on the schools that have shown him the most interest, that are truly recruiting him the hardest. But still, look at this thing, man, for, North Carolina, not that they're a blue blood in football, but being an in-state guy, I'm sure people wonder, well, hey, did UNC offer it? Yes, they did. But then you go down it, man. Georgia, Notre Dame, Miami, Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Michigan, Florida State, Penn State, Florida, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Indiana, which I guess they're technically a playoff team now, Stanford, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Vandy, Kentucky, Maryland, West Virginia, South Florida, App State, Missouri, Central Florida, Temple. I can go on and on and on. This was a monster offer list where it did come down to those schools, but certainly a guy that had interest and offers from all over the country.
Well, and there's several, I think, intriguing things about Noah Clark. The offer list that you just laid out, yes, but if you dive in a little bit deeper, this is a kid who's and we've seen this kid in person, Wes, including at camp. He is massive. He is 6'5.5", I think, is his listed height. It doesn't take much to dwarf me, Wes, as you know. But he absolutely towers. So 6'5.5", 350. He looks every bit of both of those. And Wes, he went through his entire recruiting process, or he went through the latter part of it as a 16-year-old who's about to be a senior, just turned 17 today. He's an early enrollee. So when he steps foot on South Carolina's campus in January, he'll be a 17-year-old college freshman at that size. And talked to his high school coach today at CE Jordan out of Durham, Antonio King. And he pointed out that this is a guy who's just about family and football and hanging out with his friends, who's a really good teammate. And also thought, Wes, that he has a good bit of development that he can continue to do. Obviously, you can't teach that size. Like, you're just born with it. He's got it. He can move for that size. But this is a kid who rarely comes off the field. He plays offensive line as well for his high school team. He's still young, but he has size and he has some tools. And that's a guy that you can bring in and still, I think, has a lot to give in terms of his development and his potential.
Yeah, if you're on the video version of the show right now, you're watching highlights from this past season from Noah Clark, at his high school, obviously. And Chris, I think it was kind of interesting, that final little unofficial, kind of camp day visit where he rolled up. And some will remember that was actually the same day that PJ Dean also just popped in and showed up on campus. And, I had put a lot of stock in the fact of, hey, PJ Dean just came up here just to get some work in. I thought it was a great sign for South Carolina. Obviously, that one ended up going the direction of Georgia. And early on, it was, hey, Noah Clark's going to be back on campus, but hey, his high school is going to be up here. Obviously, South Carolina felt pretty good at that point, but I didn't really necessarily put that additional visit as the reason to feel good. I didn't put much stock into it until the little tidbit we heard, while he was on campus or while he was on the way, and that was that he was driving himself up to Columbia. Sort of, depending on how you look at it, maybe as one final test of hey, can I do this every, whenever I want to go home or whenever I need to come back to campus after going home, for a guy who clearly did have some sort of local flavor to his commit finalists, or just kind of, hey, getting used to that drive, and kind of just getting a feel for what that drive would be. So, I don't think we ever actually reported that little bit of information at the time, because I felt like it was kind of a dead giveaway for the kid. But kind of a fun little nugget there about that last visit. He didn't, for what we were told, I don't think I've asked Noah this or anybody has, but from what we were told, he did not hop on the bus. He got in the car and drove himself to Columbia for that final little unofficial where he was watching South Carolina's O-line D-line camp.
Yeah, I did think that spoke volumes when you heard that on the day. I mean, he's just hanging out. You know, his high school team was there. Had, I think, a 7-on-7 team. They had a lineman camp, so there were some linemen, participating that day as well. But he didn't participate in that, but he still showed up and decided to come up on his own, like you said. So I did think that spoke volumes, and I think it was kind of that final step of like, let me get used to this, make sure this is okay, make sure everything kind of finally checks out. And Wes, when you leaving the official visit for South Carolina, they didn't get the last one. They you felt really good about where they were. There were just some signs, not just Noah's comments, but just some other things that we picked up on. You knew that South Carolina was also going to get a follow-up. That was revealed on the Sunday when he left from his official visit. It was, I'll be back in Columbia on the 19th. And you're going, okay, this combined with everything else is sounding really, really good for South Carolina. And then I know we got some indicators that were very, very positive after he wrapped up the process and had some kind of a runway and a lead up into this commitment too. Wes, I think also interesting to point out, Noah Clark fits, I think, a specific archetype of a defensive tackle who's, this is probably a guy who can play like a one technique for you. This is going to be a space eating type guy. Obviously, you look at the body type, what he can do for you. Very different, I think, than an Aiden Harris, who very much looks like a guy who's going to continue to grow into his frame and fits more of that attacking three technique type. Now you've not only got 2 4-star defensive tackles, but you've got 2 guys that I think fit very different roles in your defense, which, might be counted as a bonus depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, I think to your point, as we have seen with some other recruitments just over the years and certainly this year too, you felt good about Noah Clark after the OV, but I think important to point out, as we have seen, getting to that finish line is not ever easy, especially for big-time defensive line prospects. So this one, Chris, actually, I would say, considering his stature as a recruit and literal stature and ability to move, relatively little drama to this one down the stretch. He was one of those welcome homes to Shane Beamer. He's already told Coach he was coming. It wasn't one, for example, like a PJ Dean where we were really – like we were tracking it just because we were a little bit – I don't know about you. I was a little gun shy. Like, hey, if we're going to say this is South Carolina, let's make 100% sure. But I never really got any indications of there being much concern as they got to that finish line. Like they finished this one off. They got him in the boat and, did a good job with that. And to your point, man, I do think, like, if you can get 4-star defensive tackles, if they were literally the same carbon copy of each other, you're probably going to take them anyway, right? But I do think there's some added bonus to what you said, and that is that he is very different from Aiden Harris. And, you look at some of the guys they've had and guys they've had success with here at South Carolina the last few years, and they really want to have that 3-tech guy that you can just turn loose, that you can let go rush the passer, that you can get him in one-on-one situations with guards and say, hey, you're quicker than him, you're longer than him, beat him to the point and then close on the quarterback. Well, those guys get a lot of the flash. I think they get a lot of the attention. They get to do the, the smashing the guitar celebration that we saw TJ, make famous here. But in order to have the guy that does that, and even if you have the guy that does that, in order to create the opportunity for it, I think you got to have a Noah Clark. You got to have a guy willing to take up a couple gaps, willing and able, like from a size standpoint, but also just from a mindset standpoint, willing to be like, hey, I may not always be the one people look at, but I still play a very important role in this approach on defense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it takes a different type of mentality to say, let me go in there and take up space and maybe be a guy that gets double teamed a lot. But, that was another thing, Wes, that stood out to me talking to his high school coach today. is that he's just an unselfish guy. He's a really good teammate. He's got all his teammates coming over to his house for a celebratory dinner tonight. Like, he's just a team first type of guy. And so you're getting someone who has size, who has upside, who can move for that size. And I think also is going to carry in the right mindset of not having to be, the star player, right? You're not looking up and down a stat sheet, I don't think, at the end of Noah Clark's career and talking about how many sacks he had. I don't think, because that's not the type of role I think that he's going to be counted on having, but nonetheless, a potentially very important one.
Yeah, super important. And let's talk about this, the big picture of this kind of interior D-line class right now, man. I do think, because I talked about this on the radio too, because fans let themselves, and I get it on this, think about, hey, the trio of these two guys plus PJ Dean, like, you are cooking, right? And you miss on Dean, and maybe you lose a little bit of shine. Whereas if anybody had just told you, as Chris Sips is that tea? Is that tea with the tea bag still in there?
It's it's probably oversteeped, if that's such a thing. Okay. But yes, it is tea. The color it could be questionable at this time of day. It's 2:24.
Are you sipping on your tea at the midday little tea with Gamecock Nation? I am. You can have tea with Chris
with a Braves cup.
There you go. That cup has probably struck out 3 times since we started the show, based on what I've seen this year.
It's just a little green tea, Wes. I needed needed a pick me up.
Yeah. Sorry, easily distracted. What's up, Craig? Hope you're well, man. But if you just said shut your eyes 6, 7, 10 months ago and said, hey, they're going to get Noah Clark, they're going to get Aiden Harris, that'll be the 2 defensive tackles in the class, I feel like people would be pretty happy with that. And that's not to downplay the PJ Dean. Like, South Carolina wanted him. They clearly did. They were pushing for him. It's recruiting, though. Sometimes you hit, sometimes you miss. That's why it's important to maybe have 3 guys of this caliber that you're in on. So if you miss on one and get 2, you're still getting those 2 guys. I still think you hit the portal this offseason at that position. But I think, Chris, landing these 2 guys, and 2 that complement each other very well, as we've just talked about, it takes a little bit of that pressure off of the portal recruiting you're going to have to do. Now, I still, again, I think if you can go out and get a difference maker in the portal, I would do it. But you're not having to just fill the entire position via the portal.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, we saw in the last cycle, Carolina went out and got a couple of high school guys and multiple portal guys, right? You got Miles, you got Brownlow Dendy, Troy Pikes as a later addition, and then you brought in 2 freshman defensive tackles in Caleb Williams. Yeah, Anajuka and Zay Hardy, then Caleb Williams and Christian Ingram. So a bigger class, which you needed, given what you were losing from the roster. Ideally, you want this thing to be balanced. It hasn't always been, right? There were a couple years that I think led ultimately to this situation where South Carolina did not get enough from the high school ranks. So you are balancing it out with some guys that can help. I'll also say, Wes, it is July, and this is a very important month. And this is a month that's going to shape the class in terms of how good it could be. What is the ceiling of this class? And if South Carolina exits the month of July with a bunch of important announcements that are scheduled with more guys in the boat than not that are key targets, that'll be a great sign. If they don't, that will be a bit discouraging, maybe more than a bit discouraging in terms of the ultimate ceiling of the class. But I think there are a few things to keep in mind. People love to say, I don't count anybody as committed until signing day. But then if a kid commits somewhere else, it's like it's completely over, right? If they don't commit to your school. There are some guys, and I think PJ Dean is one of them. I'll be up front. I think it's going to be hard to flip him from Georgia. Let me just get that out there. But is he someone who will never again talk to South Carolina staff? Is that one that we'll never be asking anybody about as a check-in from now until December? I doubt it. So the point is, him and maybe some other guys, you kind of never know, right? You want to get those guys committed right now and then keep them in the class. But there are some flip possibilities maybe out there. You also have the transfer portal, as we know, which can be a crapshoot. You don't want to be overly reliant on it, but South Carolina has done, the track record shows, some good work in the transfer portal at certain positions over time. So that's an option that's out there too. So I think, man, take it for what it is. Like, yeah, we build July and this summer in July as a huge month. I'm not changing the fact that South Carolina's lost a couple guys. I'm not trying to make revisionist history. We've been seeing some of that lately. Some of those are sting, right? There are blows. There could be more blows coming up, or there could be some great victories or anywhere in between. But I think that there is some perspective needed on, hey, some recruitments may not be over. Some guys that are in South Carolina's class now or that may commit in the future, we may be tracking those because other schools are going to continue to recruit those guys as well.
Yeah, they absolutely will, man. And yeah, this is recruiting. There, if you really follow it, like I know a lot of people do, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. It's going to be frustrating at times. It's going to be exciting at other times. Fact of the matter is, you do offer like 200 people these days, so you're going to miss on more than you hit just by sheer volume of numbers, as it is. But yeah, you do want to, when you have guys in on those summer officials, you're not going to land all those guys, but you're probably going to land, I don't know, about half of them. But you do want to, of course, maybe hit on more than you miss. And fact of the matter is, that's not always going to happen. I get the frustration, man. Again, I think the fact of it is, the Carter Meadows, PJ Dean, and then Julian Walker, just the timing of it for people just feels like a brick to the face, I think. So I understand completely. Again, with Meadows, I don't think anybody was like, oh, South Carolina's getting that guy. But I think you let yourself, like, man, if you could pair that guy up with Dylan Stewart for one final season, you have a great bookend, and then you have the next Dylan potentially. You never count Sterling Lucas out. So we were going, hey, can Sterling Luke pull this off? So I get it. And, I'll be honest, man, with Julian Walker, we had started to hear the Michigan buzz. And even heard, Ethan McDowell does a fantastic job. He used to cover NC State recruiting. Now he covers Michigan recruiting. Ethan does a fantastic job covering those guys. And, he had mentioned the idea of, hey, this timeline is going to be moved up potentially significantly. I just never quite bought into the fact that Walker would, maybe it was more along the lines of like, hey, anything could happen in recruiting. But ultimately, I thought he was going to end up at South Carolina. And ultimately, he still may. Put him in that category. He still may end up at South Carolina. But, with recruiting, you truly just never quite know. Yes, he's here in Columbia. Yes, his dad is on staff. He's not originally from Columbia. His dad went to Wisconsin. They're more of a Big Ten family than a SEC family. I don't know. But, I'm trying to say I get the frustration overall and not sugarcoating any of that. But also, let's see where things go. But I would put Walker as one of the more, not shocking, but somewhat surprising developments for me this summer compared to where I thought things were with that one to start June, maybe.
Well, and I think that one was a kind of a blindsider, Wes, in terms of just, even when you started hearing that the timeline was going to be moved up, you're going, why is that, right? And I'll have a little bit more. We're here live at 2:30 on a Wednesday, maybe Wednesday night, maybe Thursday morning. just on that whole situation on the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central. Come on over if you're not a member, of course. Great time to be on. But I think that was it's a unique situation, to say the least. And I think that one kind of caught a lot of folks off guard with just how the process was navigated, how the process was handled. I'll just say that. So I think part of it, Wes, is you have all these options on the board, when you enter the spring, when you enter the summer, and they're all guys that even if you recognize even if you're a guy that goes, okay, look, Wes, I get we may not get Carter Meadows. I get it's a heavy lift. But hey, Sterling Lucas has landed a guy like that before in Dylan Stewart. I kind of trust in Sterluke. I think maybe, hey, who knows? Maybe he can get it done. And we got PJ Dean. South Carolina seems to be. I'm reading Chris and Wes that South Carolina's in a good spot there. And Julian Walker, his dad is on staff. And then you've got Smoke Matthews and Tamarian Watkins and Darius Gray. I mean, they're on and on, right? And if that board starts to narrow, even if you go, okay, Carter Meadows, I get it. But then you go, PJ Dean, we had a chance there. Julian Walker, his dad was on staff. Man, that's weird. Why would that happen? And then you start to go, okay, well, even if we lost those guys, who else is on the board, right? That's a question you and I have gotten a lot. If you don't get those guys, who can you bring in that's comparable or better talent? And it is a question that is very fair and also very fair to say, harder to answer, right? While you can say that can be true while also not saying they won't sign anybody. Class is done. Everything's cooked in a negative way. Again, having that perspective, which is tough because some of these recruiting losses lately have been difficult. I totally get that. Go tell everybody about Palmetto Golfing, our friend Brandon Cohn, PalmettoGolfing.com, Palmetto Golfing Belts. Go check out the online shop at PalmettoGolfing.com. Whether or not you're a golfer, you can enjoy all of the gear that Brandon has. He's a South Carolina guy, member of GamecockCentral.com, longtime member. You can go check out. He posts all the time on the Insiders Forum. He's got specials, I think, right now. Buy one, get one free week. PalmettoGolfing.com, which is an amazing deal. Don't hold me to that, but go check it out yourself, depending on when you're listening. He's got the needlepoint belts with the garnet, the Palmetto Tree and Moon design. He's got the cross design. He's got the blue for the state of South Carolina. Also, custom golf tees, custom golf gloves, golf towels. New products are coming soon. So if you're a golfer, if you're looking to give a gift to a golfer, great shop to do it because you're shopping locally owned business, and a South Carolina guy owned business, Brandon Cohn. That's PalmettoGolfing.com. Go check him out today.
And real quick, let me tell you about our friend Andy Luedecke, My Perfect Franchise, myperfectfranchise.net, phone number 404-973-9901. Andy is a franchise consultant. You may be saying, what does a franchise consultant do? Well, what he can do is help you if you're looking to get into business ownership yourself, whether that is just to build wealth, diversify your wealth, to leave a legacy. Maybe you have a job and want a side hustle, or maybe you're trying to go just completely out of the corporate world and dive into your own business ownership. Andy can help you do that. One of the best parts about it, his services are 100% free. He is here to help you with any questions you may have about business ownership. So if you contact him, he's going to take down some information, get to know you, get to know a little bit about what you're interested in, how much time you have to commit, and of course, what your financial commitment could be towards this new business. And then he's going to help set you up with a franchise that would best fit all those things for you. And then even better, he's going to help you every single step of the way to help you get that business off the ground, because not only is he a consultant, he's a business owner himself. Again, myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. Andy loves this stuff, man. I've talked to him on the phone a few times. Even if you just want to call him and chat about business trends, he probably will answer the call and talk your ear off about that stuff the same way we would talk to you about South Carolina football recruiting. So shout out Andy, great guy, great sponsor, not just on this show, but on several shows throughout the On3 I guess we got to say On Three Rivals Network now, Chris. I don't know how we're going to officially say that, but throughout the On Three network, we'll just keep it simple and say that. Interesting recruitments coming up, man, coming to an end. Let's talk about a couple of them. I see questions about Landon Duckworth. What's going on there? When is the final decision going to come out? Nothing is official there from Landon other than July. I did hear, I think I caught during that live stream that Wilt Fong credited Chad Simmons with, and I don't remember the exact date he said. There was a date or two that are being considered right now for Landon, sort of mid-July. So something to keep an eye on there. Certainly we'll post it whenever that is official. There you go, Clint. Appreciate you. We're just going to trust Clint on this. 11th or 18th. So that would be not this Friday. Obviously, this Friday is the 4th. Would be that next Friday or the Friday after, potentially, for a Landon Duckworth decision. Chris, it was down to South Carolina. It was down to Auburn. Auburn just took another quarterback. I think that said quite a bit about where their feelings are on where this one's headed. Again, I understand people saying, all right, what's next? Like, what are we waiting on? Landon's going to do this on his own timetable, his own timeline, and that's fair. That is his right. I don't think you have to worry about that as long as South Carolina gets to the finish line with him eventually. And I do want to make a point here, man. People have asked on the board, and I started to try to kind of answer it in my head. Okay, South Carolina was in the lead for player XYZ, but this other school B, landed the player. How come that doesn't happen the other way around? And I got to thinking, all right, if South Carolina lands Landon, it was not that many weeks ago that a lot of people were saying Duckworth was an Ole Miss lock.
Yep.
He was being projected to Ole Miss firmly. Like that's probably where he's going. You can look back at Alex Cyrus last year, 4-star wide receiver. Most people, even though that OV to Columbia went very well, most people thought he was going to Penn State. And yes, you kind of started to get word leading up to the announcement like, hey, this might actually be happening. South Carolina might be pulling this off. But many people figured that Cyrus was a Penn State lean right up to the very end. Those are just two recent ones that I came up with, Chris, off the top of my head. Now, are you going to go in? Somebody added blue bloods in there. When was the last time South Carolina just flipped a guy last minute from a blue blood? That's frankly hard for anybody to do. But there have certainly been lots of cases, if you go back, that probably they don't stick out as much as the one where South Carolina was in a good spot and then you lose out. You don't save those in your head quite. Or you save those, but then you don't really save the ones where you ended up winning out. You're just like, oh, we won that battle. But you maybe had to come from behind the scenes too.
Well, I think there is a lot. Look, there are a lot of valid concerns and questions that I've seen. But I think we also, I do see some building of straw men and some revisionist history. South Carolina's and I'm being serious. I see this every year. South Carolina leads for multiple guys, and the majority of them or all of them go elsewhere. I've legitimately seen that, and that's just not what happens. There are guys every year that they lead for that do end up going elsewhere, right? Like that happens here. It might happen everywhere. I don't follow every Power Four programs recruitment close enough to be able to say. But I think the emotional part of it kind of drums up these feelings, that those things are said, right? So, yeah, is South Carolina out every cycle flipping guys from Georgia or coming in at the last minute and taking a guy Georgia wants? No. Would you like to be at that point? Yeah, they're not there right now, And so that's part of the build. And I don't know if you have to be there, Wes. I think South Carolina's formula, quite frankly, if they could ever get to that elite level, it will look different than a Georgia. Last I checked, last year, South Carolina very, very closely made the playoff, and they did so without recruiting top 5 recruiting classes every year. Don't mistake that for me saying, so you're saying they shouldn't try to recruit? No, they should. If you go out and recruit a top 5 class 4 or 5 years in a row, the odds of you being really, really freaking good are pretty high, right? So you want to get there. But what I'm saying is this is a building process. We're not resurrecting a Georgia or an Alabama or Ohio State. This is a much different type of build. So there are some recruiting battles that South Carolina's won against some big boys. They've had some flip. It might not. I can't point out, oh, they flipped this kid from Alabama, right? But I mean, there was a good one last year. Wes Malik Clark, absolute meltdown city. Malik Clark commits on the day of the Shane Beamer Birdies with Beamer golf tournament to FSU. He's from Rock Hill. He's a 4-star wide receiver, big position of need. Freak out. He's playing for the Gamecocks right now, right? And they signed a pretty darn good receiver class. So, I think there are arguments on all sides, but perspective while you're having that debate, while you're analyzing it.
Yeah. And I'm just saying, like, I know you're not going to necessarily push a blue blood program into the locker, which is what people want. But
yes,
just in terms of feeling like, hey, we're out of it with this guy, and then flipping them, even if they weren't publicly committed, kind of flipping where they're considered to be going. Like that actually was looking through the commit list from last year. Xavion Hardy signed with South Carolina when he was supposed to be going to Mississippi State. Damola Ajitahoon got flipped from Georgia Tech to South Carolina on the final hour of signing day, basically last cycle. You came in late for Cutter. I know, he's committed to Wake Forest, but you came in, took him from them. Let's see. There was Christian Ingram. There was a stretch where he was going to Kentucky, I think people were saying, and then he ends up signing with South Carolina. Mike Tyler, I get you have the local angle there, but Mike Tyler was committed to LSU and was a take for those guys, and they wanted him, and you flip him from LSU. So, and again, that is a local guy, but, Georgia is flipping, I say. Obviously, PJ was not committed to South Carolina, but battling with them, they had the card to play of, hey, your brother played here. So Georgia had some built-in advantages there other than just being Georgia, potentially. And the kid is going back and forth on, do I want to go to Georgia, a place I know my brother was comfortable at, or do I want to build my own path, create my own path? And, I'm sure that's a tough decision, I think, for a young guy who clearly liked the coaches and liked the situation at both schools. So, I'm with you. I don't think we're going to be talking about PJ flipping. But you know what, dude? I firmly believe that kid really liked South Carolina. Like, really, really liked South Carolina. If Georgia keeps taking defensive tackles and you're PJ Dean, are you not going, man, let me at least keep this conversation going with South Carolina? Because they got another one hours later after he committed.
Yeah.
And they're in on the Sone kid.
Yeah, that's a good player. Yeah, I mean, you never know, man. He had a decision date set. We know without a shadow of a doubt that it was going back and forth in the days, including the day of the announcement.
Yeah.
And what does that tell you? It's really, really close. Somebody brought up Jalewis Solomon in the chat. That's how that one went. Ultimately, it went South Carolina's way. I'm not saying it will be the same here, but I am saying it was close. And as I said earlier, I imagine this is not the very, very last we hear of it. He may sign with Georgia, go play there for 4 or 5 years and move on to whatever. But just with how close that one was, you always got to monitor a situation like that.
Yeah, let's before we get out of here, man, let's hit on maybe a sensitive subject for people right now. A couple of guys that Gamecock fans are tracking. It's Marion Watkins, Northwestern, and of course, Smoke Matthews, somebody that Gamecock fans have been keeping an eye on for years now. And let's start with T. Watt with Watkins. Some late buzz. Wilt Fong says, "Hey, I'm give A&M the edge right now," which I think is a little bit strong. But there's also this thing right now where people are kind of just, what does that guy know? Wilt Fong clearly has sources all around the country. Like, you can be mad at the message in a national. Nobody is ever going to get this recruiting junk right all the time. Like, it's just not going to happen. It is easy to pile on. And with PJ, if you really go back and look at, he had it as Georgia over the weekend. He had it as South Carolina on Monday morning, which it, without a shadow of a doubt, was South Carolina on Monday morning. You're just not at the finish line yet, so it doesn't count. But it was. And then he puts out an article right before saying, hey, Georgia is battling to the end, which, Chris, in my opinion, is recruit reporter talk for this guy's going to Georgia, but I have been absolutely sworn to secrecy. I'm not allowed to put in that he's going to Georgia. So I'm going to say, hey, it's back very, 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 very tight again. So I say all that to say, when he says, hey, A&M is making a push here, A&M could lead here, that's true. That's 100% true. Chad Simmons had picked up on that actually, I don't know, week 2 ago. The A&M talk is real. Now, ultimately, does T-Watt end up leaving the Palmetto State? I still have a hard time seeing that be the case. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased, and I'm from that area. Maybe I'm dead wrong on that too, but I think the relationships there, Carolina's been such a good spot for him for so long. I mean, I would argue that one would maybe burn for Carolina fans more than any of them, just because I do think he was a genuine lean to South Carolina. Like, even Smoke, it was always like, yeah, South Carolina's going to have a good shot with Smoke. South Carolina may have the best shot with Smoke. Was he truly like he's going to South Carolina all this time? I don't know. With Tamarian Watkins, it's kind of been the words you would hear, he's going to South Carolina. Hey, if anybody could change that, maybe Georgia, but they'd have to do a lot to change that. And now, boom, here's A&M. It's real. I've heard it too, but it is just a little bit. I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it, for me, on that one.
Yeah. No, I mean, the talk is definitely not just made up. Like, it is legitimate. Yeah. I know you and I were talking about it yesterday based on some info we had heard. Interesting. A&M is, Wes, a school that's trying to shoot for the number 1 class in the country.
They're making investments.
They're making investments. They are. And they're recruiting T-Watt as a linebacker, from what I hear. So that's kind of, surely you think that's baked into the decision making. What does he think of that versus what does he think of South Carolina's plan? I think there's a lot at play there. So I'm with you. It is kind of tough just because we've gone through this whole process. You never want to assume in recruiting, but that's about as close as you can get to assuming that a guy is going to end up in a class. And then here in the last, really few weeks, A&M has really made a big rise to where they're a legitimate contender and someone you got to track going in. So tough to envision him not going with South Carolina. Is at the same time is a legitimate possibility he ends up in College Station. I think we have to say it is a legitimate possibility. So I'm not putting in a pick on that one yet. don't know. Definitely monitoring going forward.
Yeah, got to get to the finish line, man. That's the trend on all these. And then Smoke Matthews, in some ways similar, but also in other ways a very different recruitment, because this is one where, Chris, I feel like there have been a bunch of different other schools that along the way have had legitimate shots with Smoke. Now, South Carolina has been in it the whole time. You know, like they've always been in that top 4, top 5, top 3, whatever it's been. You've heard different schools rotate around down the stretch. It is Texas. Now, they've been gaining momentum for months now.
Yep.
They really have. And you were just wondering, all right, is the length of time South Carolina's been in on him going to be what wins out, or kind of the little bit more bells, whistles, brand of Texas, even though you got to go all the way over there across the country to play. But even more so than, you're like trying to put percentages on it, even more so than this A&M thing with Watkins, the Texas thing has been there for a while as a possibility with Smoke, even though it did feel pretty good for the Gamecocks directly coming out of the OV here.
Yeah, I think with Smoke, South Carolina has been, and publicly he's named South Carolina as his leader in the past. I think they've been the team to beat. Like, they have been the consistent team. For a while, hey, Florida State made a big impression. For a while, hey, this one really looks like a Palmetto State battle between Clemson and South Carolina. I mean, that was legitimately the deal. Then all of a sudden, Clemson just pretty much totally fell off with Smoke Matthews. Here comes Texas, led by Mark Orfe, who spent time on South Carolina's staff working with Grady Brown, now at Texas, seems to be a rising young recruiter, has recruited him very hard. And look, man, it's Texas, playoff team, Austin, a lot of allure, I would argue, easy to fall in love with. And I think especially on the official visit, all that happened. So now you're finished with your official visits. You move your timeline up because you're just done with recruiting. You're ready to get the thing over with. Where does it settle? And Texas is more than a legitimate factor, man. I know Wilt Fong, Chad Simmons, they've written they feel like Texas has the edge. I haven't moved my pick yet off of South Carolina. I'll be honest, I may. This thing's going to happen on July 11th. I think there's a ways to go, and there's a lot more to shake out in the next, 9 days. But Texas is legit with Smoke Matthews. They have a really good opportunity to get him. I think South Carolina is still in there too.
Yeah, and dude, Orfe, dude's a stud, man. He for those who don't know, he spent 4 years here in Columbia, and he was one of those guys, man. I remember being around him back then, I'm sure I'm missing some people, so nobody take offense if I used to talk to you or whatever. But Joe Bowen, remember, was like an off the field coach, and there was kind of like this guy is gonna climb the ranks pretty quick. And Joe is now the defensive coordinator. Last I checked, for Limbo at Buffalo. And so Orfe was like a defensive quality control guy for a couple of years, was a grad assistant for a couple of years here in Columbia. Then he got an on the field job, was at like Montana State, then Utah State, then slowly working his way up, and ends up at Rutgers, where he actually was recruiting. I don't know if he ever really had a shot at Rutgers, but was recruiting Smoke already. So I do think there's a little sense from the outside, like big picture, like, well, how long has Texas really been in it with Smoke? Well, maybe Texas as a school hadn't been in there as long as South Carolina, but the guy who would be coaching him up, Mark Orfe, has been involved there for a while and has a relationship there. And dude is a winner. Like he's going to do very well, in my opinion, at Texas, and is going to put up a battle with South Carolina here. And Mark is from the state of Texas, so he's back at home recruiting to his home state. Didn't go to Texas, but still is very comfortable and very familiar with everything out there in that state. So, going to be a fascinating one to close out close out following his recruitment, Chris.
It will be, man. I mean, there's other decisions on deck. You know, Joel Combe, a DB, Kashi Barnes, another DB. You know, two big, long-limbed defensive backs. Combe out of Georgia, Barnes out of Greensboro, North Carolina. Plenty of other guys who, you think about a Darius Gray, Wes, a 5-star offensive lineman who has not set a decision date, but finished up a very large slate of official visits. South Carolina got the last. Duckworth, who we talked about. Like, there are a lot of guys on the board that are maybe going to decide this month. Maybe it'll be another time, but will really help kind of tell the story of where South Carolina's class could end up being. A lot to track, in the next 2 weeks and really this entire month.
Yeah, and right now, Combe sounds like South Carolina and Tennessee, I believe, from what I've heard. I think that one, maybe you've heard otherwise, Chris. I think that's another fairly tight one. Like, I think it's close. I think it could go either way. There is a little bit of buzz out there about Barnes and South Carolina, like South Carolina maybe being the favorite there. A couple of weeks until that announcement, or a few weeks until that announcement. So as we have seen, things can shift around quite a bit down the stretch, but the Gamecocks certainly still in that one. Travis Johnson tomorrow, the 4th. Doesn't really feel like we've heard much buzz about South Carolina on that one down the stretch. He took the OV. I don't know if you've heard anything different, Chris. That's not really one I'm counting on from a South Carolina perspective. But just worth mentioning since he did take that official.
Yeah, I think Johnson, Michigan's the program that's had a lot of buzz as of late. And I agree with what you said on Joel Combe and Barnes as well. And, I feel like Darius Gray, is getting a little bit lost in this thing, yeah. He's getting a little bit lost that you had a 5-star. He's ranked as the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the country who is being courted by programs all around the country that you seem to have more than a solid shot in there too. So, a lot of focus on some of these other high-profile recruitments for good reason. But definitely some other guys worth pointing out that took officials this summer. And Wes, one thing we know, man, there's going to be some other names to surface, in the coming, probably particularly on the defensive line. I don't know when it'll happen, but eventually we're going to hear some names of, hey, here's some guys, whether they're newer names, uncommitted, maybe committed to other schools, that, hey, South Carolina is making a run here, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And real quick, one other kind of development that I wanted to hit on that we have not talked about. I think the timing was such that we have not talked about it here on the show. We've only been doing them like once a week right now, which I think is an example of what you're talking about. Kaden Ramsey, in-state, kind of wide receiver in high school, but now being recruited, by South Carolina at the tight end position. This was an interesting one in that, all right, you already have 1 tight end committed. South Carolina wants to take 2 in the class. They were in, pretty strongly. They were kind of down the road, I would say, with T. Riley. It became apparent that wasn't going to work out. That wasn't going to be a fit. And they already kind of had started the path with Kaden Ramsey, I think. He was on campus multiple times. He was on campus in June. Ran a good time while on campus. Is a massive kid in terms of frame. And South Carolina just quickly said, look, hey, we're moving on. This is our next target at that position. And somebody that, Chris, we were a little bit kind of maybe sworn to secrecy a little bit on, but was a guy who Carolina was already, I would say, very intrigued with his upside and potential.
Yeah, Carolina's been watching him, Wes, for quite a while. Out across high school here in South Carolina. And, you just weren't sure if he would end up being a guy that South Carolina offered or not. It's kind of a to be determined type of thing. Obviously, South Carolina for a while did go after T. Riley. He ended up being an in-state offer for him. But as you just outlined, that ultimately didn't work out. Ramsey's a guy that South Carolina very intrigued by and knew, hey, this could be a guy for us at some point. And hey, we've seen examples of this, man. We've seen examples of, you have maybe a target, this would be a second tight end in the class. You've got Jamel House from Newberry already on board. You might have a guy in mind, and then ultimately you go in another direction, and you can end up doing just fine there too. And that could ultimately be the case with Kaden Ramsey, a guy that's got a lot of upside, kind of receiver-esque type of skills, and I think a lot of athletic potential just based on his measurables and his skill level.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Also, final thing here, if you have noticed, I've seen, this has been posted about, man, but maybe people hadn't been paying attention to it as much. But yes, the On3 sort of purchase of Rivals has officially gone through. That doesn't really mean much of anything for us locally at Gamecock Central. Coverage will stay the same, but it will hopefully mean for you subscribers even more value from your subscription in terms of there being more fan sites out there. If you want to go read them, you can read their content. You can read their message boards. Chris, I've mentioned Tiger Illustrated. Some people have said, why would I ever want to read about Clemson? If that's not your thing, completely fine. Other people, though, I know like to read about what's going on with their rival. Tell me about the latest drama at Clemson. Tell me how their team is coming along. So that is now there for you as well. The biggest, longest running, best Clemson site out there is now on the same network as Gamecock Central, which I think is a good thing for our subscribers. And also, you're just going to see a lot of those national names from the Rivals brand that you maybe saw when Gamecock Central was on Rivals are now putting out articles, content, posting on the message boards, all under the same umbrella. So if you see different stuff, Rivals On3, Rivals is basically the national recruiting brand now of On3, but it's all under the On3 umbrella. And Gamecock Central, of course, will still be right there covering everything and anything for you from a South Carolina perspective. Did I say all that right, Chris?
Yep, I think you nailed it, man.
If you were a subscriber to Gamecock Central and Gamecock Scoop, which was the old South Carolina rival site after Gamecock Central left, if you're a subscriber to both, you should have been put in a category where they said, hey, this is a dual membership. You don't have to do anything. It's going to naturally carry over. One of those subscriptions will be canceled and then be pushed into one. If you were just a subscriber on Rivals, that won't be carried over. But if you have any issues at all in terms of billing, hit up support@on3.com where you can get that taken care of. So, all right, y'all, that's going to do it. He is Chris. I'm Wes. Like Yuva says, y'all mix in some water this weekend. I know lots of July 4th festivities going on. Chris, they always tell you to wear sunscreen. So
I will. It probably won't help, but
they all need to wear sunscreen. But also, seriously, drink enough water, drink enough fluids. It's going to be hot as always. Take care of yourselves, y'all. Be careful. Nobody lose any fingers or limbs or arms or anything like that. And come back and see us here on GC Live next week as we'll start to get ever closer to some of these other final announcements for South Carolina targets. All right, he's Chris. I'm Wes. As always, appreciate y'all joining. Y'all have a great 4th, and we'll see you.